I've been thinking about the parable at the beginning of John's Gospel, chapter 15, in which Jesus compares himself to a vine tended by God his Father and his followers as the branches of that vine. And for the branches to bear fruit, they must be pruned, which I think refers to the uncomfortable process of being perfected by the work of Jesus and responding to that. And the fruit that they bear is presumably the loving action which they imitate, Christ's own loving nature. It's almost as if the sap running through the vine is this love from Christ, which his followers are called upon to express in the world. But I think there are at least two ways of understanding this parable. One of the things about parables is there's normally at least two ways of understanding them, and they're meant to stimulate further thought rather than to give a hard and fast understanding of what they might be trying to say. And it seems to me that you can look at it in a more restrictive way, which I think has some merit, but is not the only way you can look at it. And in this more restricted way, it is simply referring to membership of a particular church, perhaps your own church or denomination, which you may feel to be the most correct one, whether it's West or East, Catholic or Protestant. And in this, in order to function properly as a Christian, you need to be part of this linked organization, the branches of which Christ is the vine, the actual whole plant. And it also refers to the fact that we can do nothing on our own. We're linked together in a community such as a church. And I think as a warning against trying to be totally individualistic, going it alone, not learning from the wisdom of others, not being part of a community, which is particularly these days a very difficult thing to be because we are increasingly solitary and individualistic in our habits, either necessarily so or through choice. I think there's some merit in this, that a community of some kind is good, valuable, and even necessary because we can learn from each other, we can teach each other, we can support each other and uphold and upbuild each other. But I want to suggest something perhaps a little bit more radical and understand this parable in a rather more extensive way, one might say universal way, because I don't see Jesus, I don't see Christ just as a particular founder of an organization, a visible group of people who put his teachings into practice or tried to put his teachings into practice with more or less success over the years, but something deeper, according to which if Christ is God taking on the universal human nature, the cosmic Christ, if you like, in which all humanity is recapitulated, then the idea of the vine and the branches enters a slightly sort of different area, according to which perhaps it's the case that at a fundamental level, every human being, simply in virtue of being human, is linked to the humanity of Christ, that the love, that the sap of Christ's nature, of Christ's identity, is flowing through everybody simply in virtue of their humanity, universally and eternally taken on by Christ. And it is therefore a link between us and God. And if we start to look at this, and you might think this is a far too sort of prodigal, far too extensive way of understanding the work of Jesus. Surely it should be much more demanding and restrictive. Surely it should be something that excludes people who aren't Christians. But just bear with me for a minute and consider the possibility that in our humanity, whatever formal religion we belong to, we are perhaps linked to the Christ who is both divine and human, divine as the creator of all, and human as you and me and everybody else who shares our humanity. And I think a couple of things might follow from this, which I think are perhaps useful to reflect upon all the time, or perhaps particularly at the moment. I've been very troubled recently by thinking about identity politics and identity issues and all the conflicts that are going on. And there are all sorts of reasons for this. There seems to be some huge ethical shift going on. And it's one that is not universally accepted because it's creating divisions. And I'm speaking here from somebody who might be seen to be on one side of the divide, reflecting a traditional, older hegemony or leadership or power, as I am late middle age, perhaps emerging from middle age into the beginnings of old age. I don't know. I'm a white man. I'm middle class, if you want to put it in a perhaps snappier way, which is not an original one. I'm posh, pale, male, and stale. And so I might be seen to be on one side of the divide, and who am I to talk about identity politics and culture wars? But I think I have something to say, which is that if it is the case that in virtue of our common humanity, whatever that is in terms of gender identity or racial identity or even chosen identities, which is a controversial issue at the moment, yet we all share something very precious, something very important in our common humanity, which gives us a fundamental dignity, a fundamental value and worth in virtue of the fact that we are linked to the cosmic creator and the cosmic human Christ. And so we are all indeed branches on the same vine in virtue of our common humanity, which has been made precious by what Christ has done. And if we really took that seriously, then we wouldn't need to have the identity struggles that we do have, which are all to do with oppression, exploitation, abuse, labeling people, creating divisions of superiority, of inferiority, of dominance and victimhood, and so on and so forth. And these historical ills, which are still present among us today, sadly, are to do with the fact, it seems to me, that we haven't affirmed the preciousness of our common humanity. And this is a very valuable thing. And if we can rediscover that genuine value of our common humanity, the fact that we share much more with each other, that we have much more in common than differentiates us, and can see the value that we have coming from our shared identity as humans, which I would characterize in terms of being branches of this central vine coming from God through Christ, then I think we can relearn the value of other people of whatever kind they are and learn to treat everyone with respect, not to say even with love. And then there wouldn't need to be the identity struggles, the culture wars that are taking place at the moment. And another thing that follows from this is that even though we have this huge privilege, we also have huge demands made upon us, because in the passage from John, we're called upon to bear fruit. We're not just called upon to think, well, we have this status, this identity in virtue of what we've received from Christ, therefore we can relax. Far from it. There is a great demand to respond to our calling in the way we bear fruit, and we can bear fruit in our imitation of the prodigal, the promiscuous love that Jesus extended, promiscuous in the sense of making no distinction between people on the basis of their presumed worth. And in this way too, perhaps we can offer an alternative to the culture wars that so bedevil us at the moment, because Jesus transcended these sorts of culture wars at a time when those around him were making very obvious divisions between male and female, Jew and Gentile, person with status and person without status. He rode roughshod over all those in the prodigal outpouring of his love. And perhaps we are called upon to do the same, something which is very challenging, which is very difficult, but at this time, as at no other, perhaps, fundamentally, urgently necessary. And may God bless you all this night, and enjoy your status as fellow humans with Christ, and, as I will try to do, respond to that in the way you live your lives.